Across the street from Monhegan Middle School exists the remnants of an institution that was once vital to Middletown, New York's economy, the Middletown State Homeopathic Hospital. While shut down and abandoned now, this historic site opened in 1874 and was the first hospital to strictly treat mental disorders in the United States. When thinking of a psychiatric center of the past, many things come to mind. Possibly something like this.
Electroshock therapy may be recommended for other disorders. Hydrotherapy is useful in calming disturbed patients. So are sedative packs.
And then there's the perceptions of the students next door.
It's okay.
This is Nicky, a student of Middletown High School. He also attended Monhegan Middle School, which is directly across from the Psych Center. I wanted to ask you, Nick, what your take is on the Psych Center. What do you think of it?
It's a waste of space, that's for sure. And going to Monhegan and, walking through the hallways and just seeing it across the way, it's weird because you have this school practically out in the middle of nowhere. And then you have a psych ward, and it's just like, does anyone go to it? Is it, in use?
Paul Braun, my colleague, and an individual that grew up in Middletown, also worked at the facilities and had experienced it in his youth.
As a kid growing up in Middletown, I had many memories of riding my bike in the state hospital, looking at the buildings and some of the patients. It was actually quite frightening, to be honest with you. A lot of bars. It almost reminded me of old late 1800 industrial community with bars on the windows, and I remember seeing a lot of patients. Also, later in my life, I played a lot of baseball there. The baseball field where patients would come down, probably 25 years ago.
While the various buildings of the Middletown Homeopathic Hospital look menacing now in their disrepair covered in graffiti, they were not as menacing as the media often portrays mental institutions. If one was to Google search Psychiatric Center, quite a few things would come up. If we actually look at the Google images, we get quite a few things portrayed by the media. We have these monolithic buildings, some of which look very frightening. Now, if we actually look at psychiatric patient, a whole new set of things comes to mind. We've got scenes from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, but a lot of these have one thing in common. A lot of the people look very upset. Now, this is actually not entirely the case in some places. Take, for instance, the nursing staff and doctors who often lived on site in this very building. They would innovate a new type of therapy. The Middletown Homeopathic Hospital was actually very innovative in its use of a new type of therapy, known as baseball therapy. They actually had their own team, the Asylums, and one of their members would go on to be in the major leagues. Jack Chesborough, or Happy Jack as he was better known, would start playing for the Asylums and then move to play for the New York Yankees. With old psychiatric centers often being portrayed as torturing their patients, they are often given a bad rap. The Middletown Homeopathic Hospital actually provided many services for both the community and their patients, as well as innovative techniques.
I also have a memory of visiting a relative of mine in the back where they had miniature golf courses, they had a shuffleboard.
Interestingly, leisure activities were commonplace for the patients as well as the staff. Mini-golf, for instance, was used, as well as shuffleboard. Patients even often partook in gardening through the gardening club at the state hospital. It is historically recounted that the Rose Garden was a beautiful place in which many people came to visit, and it was one of the centerpieces of the town. The main building, and also what was the oldest building in its prime, was a beautiful specimen. It was in this very building that many patients stayed and were medically treated by the various staff working. In 2015, the oldest building on the grounds here of the Middletown Homeopathic Hospital burnt down, a victim of arson. It's unfortunate. It was a historic building, and many would say it was
the crown jewel of this wonderful complex.
While the original building fell victim to arson, many of the buildings at the facility still stand, such as the second heating plant that was produced for the facility. It was fed through coal run by a direct rail line. Middletown, New York was built upon the railroad and was a railroad stop that was frequented by many lines such as the O&W and Erie rail lines that ran directly through the center of town. Other buildings still stand on the site as well, such as the Middletown Clinic. As I've mentioned before, the media often portrays mental institutions as a negative place, but in this case it often gave back to the community through different means.
For instance, social activities were found to be very beneficial for those that were committed. We would have activities such as the Friendship Club, where they would learn new and exciting ways of communicating with the world.
So one might ask, was there any reality to these stories told by the media and the pictures that we have in our mind when we think of mental institutions? Well, some of it was in fact reality.
I also remember stories from one of my relatives about how in the 60s he was put in a straitjacket.
We may never know what went on inside of all of these walls, but I think my colleague states best what we all in Middletown think of the Psych Center.
So unfortunately there's a lot of stories going around about it, but I think a lot of it more is urban myth rather than reality. So a lot of interesting conversations, but for those of us that did grow up in Middletown years ago, it was a place that did kind of have a tendency to be kind of scary, to be honest with you.